Hello my sewing friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Silvia, and what I like to do the most in my spare time is trying out new patterns and sewing new garments and then sharing my favorite with you here on YouTube. If you like this type of content, then please consider to subscribe to the channel. Also, thank you very much to the 70 people who have already done that. It really means a lot to me and you really have made my day, so thank you very much. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make this lovely shirt. It's called the Antoinette shirt and it's a pattern by Hiya Stitches. She's a very talented French girl who comes up with her very own sewing patterns and she sells them on Etsy. So I will link her store in the description below. I will also put the link of her YouTube channel so you can see some of her content as well if you like. The only thing that I've done differently from the original pattern is the sleeves. I wanted a puffier look, so what I've done is to put an elastic at the bottom to create that effect. So of course I will show you how to do it in the video. All of the things that I think might be useful for you to know, I will put them in the description below. Enjoy the video and don't forget to give me a big thumbs up if you liked it. These are the pattern pieces you'll need. 2 front panels, which I have already interfaced. 1 back panel. 2 color pieces, which again I have already interfaced. 1 ruffle strip. 2 sleeves. 1 strip of bias binding, which is already folded in 4. Okay, so let's start from pinning the front darts with right sides together. Just a couple of pins will do, you don't need to go overboard with them at this stage. At this point, I also like tracing a line with an erasable marker. This guides me visually to know where I have to sew. And it also gives you a better chance to sew the 2 darts as equal as possible. Once the darts are sewn, I'll tie a couple of knots at the end to secure the stitching. These will create a neater finish instead of backstitching. I also press them downwards with an iron. Now I pin the 2 front panels with the back panel, right sides together at the shoulders. I stitch them off camera following a 1 cm seam allowance. I will also finish the edges with an overlocker, but if you don't have one, there's no need to panic. Some zigzag stitches will do just fine. Let's now work on the ruffle of the collar. I have already folded the strip in half lengthwise, and I now sew 2 lines of gathering stitches. To do that, I set my machine to the longest stitch length possible and sew 2 parallel lines without backstitching. Then I pull through to the upper side 2 of the threads and gently start pulling them to create the gathers. The fabric I'm using is quite stiff, so I'm taking my time to avoid breaking the threads and having to start all over again. Once I'm happy with its length, I start pinning it to one of the collar pieces, right sides together, adjusting the length as I go along until it's covering the 3 edges of the collar. I can now baste it in place, sewing just a little before the seam allowance. I now also take a couple of seconds to admire it because it's already looking lovely. Now I take the other collar piece, make a sign at the center and pin it to the other one, right sides together, keeping the ruffle strip sandwiched in between. Now, as you can see, it's the time to go overboard with pins. I sew the 3 layers together, and after that I will trim the seam allowance, just about a half. I will then turn the collar inside out and make sure I take out any gathering stitches that are visible from the outside. Moving on to the assembly of the collar, I will put a pin at the center of the collar to make sure I will align it to the center of the bodice. I then pin the rest of it in place and sew it together along the curved edge. I now open the bias binding strip and align it to the raw edge of the collar, trying to match the first folder of the bias tape to the stitching line of the collar we have just sewn. The edges of the bias tape must stick out of the collar of about 2 centimeters. This is a bit fiddly to begin with, but with a little bit of patience I got the hang of it just by the end. Once the bias tape is in place, I will replace the horizontal pins with another set, pinning them perpendicularly to the fabric. This is just personal preference and not for any other reason. I just find it easier that way. I now sew on top of the first folder of the bias tape. Next, I pin the bias tape flat, so it covers all the raw edges of the collar and of the bodice pieces, all the way up to the end of the collar. I then sew it starting from the beginning of the ruffle and not from the end that is sticking out of 2 centimeters. This way you won't be able to see the stitch line when you're wearing the shirt. I fold the top of the placket right sides together against the front panel and sew it at the top following 1 centimeter of seam allowance. I trim the corner and fold it inside out so that the placket falls into place. I pin the placket all the way down and sew it. Let's move now on to the sleeves. I have already sewn the 2 lines of gathering stitchings between the notches. I pin the sleeves, matching the center with the shoulder seam, and then matching the notches and the edges. Once I get to the central part, I pull the gathering threads until the sleeve is the same length of the part underneath. I sew it in place and then finish the seams with the overlocker. I find this time of the project one of the most exciting ones. The project is already taking shape. I'm loving and I'm dying for these puffy sleeves. I'm curious to know if you made it this far and if you also like it. So if you do, please let me know, giving me a big thumbs up. Okay, so now I have taken the shirt inside out and I start pinning the sides and sew all along following the seam allowance. After that, I finish the raw edges of the sides, the hem, and the end of the sleeves with my overlocker. I've decided to deviate a little from the original instructions for the sleeves, and I prefer to attempt a puffier look with the addition of the elastic at the bottom. To do that, I fold the sleeves of 4 inches wrong sides together, and I sew 2 lines at the center of this fold to create a case for the elastic. Of course, I make sure that the case is wide enough to accommodate the elastic, so you have to adjust the measurements depending on the elastic that you're going to use. And here it is. This is the case we've just created. With a safety pin and a bit of patience, I will insert the elastic into the case. I have sewn the ends together, stitching back and forth a few times to secure it in place. Once that's done, I pull the elastic all the way inside the case, and I close the gap with a few stitches. Don't they look very romantic? I can see myself walking in Paris with these puffy sleeves. We are almost at the end. So for the hem, I simply fold it over the overlock stitches twice and sew it down, not worrying too much about the seam allowance, but just sewing at the edge of the fold. I mark where I want the 5 buttonholes with a marker pen and do a few trials on a piece of scrap fabric just to be sure it's going to work. At this stage, I'm just careful of placing the needle in the right place, and then I let my machine doing its magic. For opening the buttonholes, I usually use a seam ripper starting from one end and moving it until the center of the hole. Then I turn it the other way and start opening from the opposite end, meeting again in the middle. This way I avoid going too far, risking of cutting through my stitches by mistake. Then I place the button placket with my buttonholes on top of the other side, pinning it in place so it doesn't move, and mark the position of the buttons. That's it! I can now enjoy some TV while I sew all the buttons.